Preet Bharara knows a thing or two about the Department of Justice and our legal system. He served as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York for nearly 8 years, and he joins me now. So, Preet, I just wanted to start kind of with the overall point I was making there. I mean, you were a federal prosecutor under the last Democratic administration. Explain just how ridiculous these claims of a weaponized DOJ are, and by all means, if there's anything I missed, please add it in as well.
No, you were pretty comprehensive. Good to be with you. Look, it is perfectly legitimate for people to have arguments about and give their opinions about the nature of the evidence, the strength of the evidence, the rulings by the judge, whether or not there are appealable issues. But this grand flat earth, kind of society, conspiracy theorizing that goes on just stretches every bit of credulity a normal good faith person would have. I mean, the theory is, as you outlined at the start, is that Joe Biden, who's the commander-in-chief and president of the United States, has all this power that he's using to sort of be a puppeteer of someone who doesn't even work in the federal system. And Republicans once upon a time used to care about federalism and talk about federalism, that he is pulling the strings of Alvin Bragg to get him to bring the case, causing him to win the case. And this person who has all this power doesn't do anything about his own Justice Department, who today is bringing a case, as you pointed out, beginning a trial against his own son. And if there's one thing we know about Joe Biden, and people can have different views about whether they want to vote for him or not, I think it's the case that he loves his son more than he wants to hurt Donald Trump, his erstwhile and future political competitor. And, next time you have someone on the show who's a Republican, you should ask them, isn't it true that Joe Biden has the authority and power constitutionally to fire the special counsel? The answer would be yes. Isn't it true that Joe Biden has the power constitutionally to pardon in advance his son and spare him from this spectacle? He does. And he didn't do any of those things. And the idea that a person who's not exercising his authority to protect his son was otherwise somehow a puppeteer of a local prosecutor in Manhattan just borders on ludicrousness and absurdity.
Yeah, I just want to touch on something you just said. I mean, David Weiss, I mentioned this in the opening, he kept him on. He did not have to do that. There were several other moments where he has not had to keep him in the job. He has done that. We don't know what will happen in the outcome of this case. And as you also just mentioned, Alvin Bragg and I did as well, but people should understand this doesn't work for Joe Biden, doesn't work for the department. It doesn't work that way. No. He doesn't direct them. I want to ask you, go ahead.
Even people in the even people in the Justice Department work at some remove from orders of the president. People may forget this. I was fired by President Trump, in part because I refused to speak to him back in March of 2017 because it's inappropriate for a sitting United States attorney who has jurisdiction over his company, his foundation, and all sorts of other things, to talk to him without being communicated with by the Attorney General of the United States. There's an independence of the Justice Department, which is triple or quadruple or infinite when you're talking about a local prosecutor who was elected by the people of Manhattan, not appointed by the President of the United States.
An important thing for people to know and understand. I mean, if DOJ officials came through the White House, I kind of moved in the other, not even the White House, in the street, I would move in the other way to kind of avoid them. Right. I want to ask you just about, I mean, you have dealt with juries, you've dealt with the totality of the judicial system. And I've been trying to highlight how dangerous it is, these attacks on so many people who are participating, including the everyday Americans, the jurors, none of whom have come out publicly yet, and I certainly hope they don't. But tell me a little bit about it, those who work in the legal system, how dangerous this is and concerning when you hear these type of attacks, not just from Trump, but from many of the enablers around him.
Yeah. No, it's terrible. Look, again, there's a legitimate place for good faith debate and criticism of judicial rulings and arguments made by the defense or the prosecution. Look, people on the left, I think legitimately, I'm one of them, in my podcast and elsewhere, criticize the legitimacy of the Supreme Court and talk about whether or not Sam Alito or Justice Clarence Thomas should recuse themselves from various matters. That's good and open and honest debate. And the people who have a problem with Judge Merchan not recusing himself, you can have that argument. The Court of Appeals will have the final word on that. But attacking jurors in our system, I think, is a bridge too far. As you pointed out, a prosecutor would have said, and I said on a number of occasions, because we didn't win every case we brought, and Alvin Bragg would have taken in stride an acquittal in this case. And I think the good and rational thing to have done was, you can fight in the Court of Appeals, you can say you disagree with the jurors' decisions, but we've created a climate, not we, not you and I, but Donald Trump and his supporters have created a climate in which it's acceptable to talk about doxing jurors and attacking jurors and putting their safety in jeopardy. It's an unusual thing in a white-collar case. It doesn't involve violence or the mob, that the jurors' identities were kept anonymous. That's a function of the landscape that has been created by Donald Trump and his supporters. It's not a good thing for America or for the judicial system.
That's an important thing for people to remember. I mean, there's a reason we don't know their names. I want to ask you about this ProPublica piece that just came out. I mean, it talks about Trump funneling money and benefits to witnesses in his cases, which seems to raise a lot of, including benefits from his campaign, extra bonuses. It raised a lot of red flags to me, but I want to know what you made of it.
Yeah, I don't know. It certainly doesn't ring hollow. It rings true. On a much more, I think, insidious level, Donald Trump has known to have interfered in cases before. He's known to have sent messages on social media and otherwise to witnesses who are going to be against him, either admonishing them not to be against him or suggesting that there was something good in it for them if they were going to be for him. So he's done that sort of thing before. The question of whether or not he's engaged in witness tampering has been raised before. I think there are a lot of interesting issues raised by the ProPublica article based on the timing of benefits given to folks. But it's a very, very difficult thing for a prosecutor to prove that there was jury tampering based on what's happened and reported so far. So I take a little bit of a moment to examine them further and see if there's other reporting about it and an investigation that follows. But it's troubling and not surprising.
Troubling, not surprising. More we need to know about it. The other thing I wanted to just ask you about is nearly every single Republican official in the country, or far too many, is taking the opportunity to attack this verdict and the rule of law. Yesterday on Meet the Press, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas appeared reluctant to even condemn, as we've been talking about, threats against jurors. So I just want to play that and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Since Thursday's verdict, there has been a spike in violent rhetoric online directed toward the jurors in particular, including calls to publish their addresses, physical attacks. Will you condemn those threats?
Well, Peter, I don't know what obscure websites that you've gone to.
Well, no, this is from Truth Social. It's not an obscure website. An individual says, I hope every juror is doxxed and they pay for what they have done. May God strike them dead. We will on November 5th and they will pay. You can condemn that threat, can't you?
Again, I will always say that violence has no place in our politics. Again, I don't know what obscure account you found on social media.
Well, it's on Truth Social. It's on his website.
That wasn't a hard or trick question, I think, from Peter, to condemn violence or threats against jurors. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, and so I'm asking you, what does it tell you that a sitting senator is so hesitant to condemn these type of calls for violence?
Well, I don't know. I can't put myself in the mind of you, a senator, and that particular senator. But if someone has an aspiration to be the vice president or a cabinet member or a member of the Supreme Court, all of which are not unviable prospects for someone like him and others, you don't want to get athwart. You want to get on the wrong side of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's rhetoric, I think, is the model here for everyone else who's talking about it. It's very performative. I think it's dangerous when we're talking about separating out criticism, good faith criticism of the judge or the prosecutors or the defense lawyers from the jury. I've not seen that before. There are jury decisions that have been made in this country in consequential cases, including the O.J. Simpson case back 30 years ago, that people disagree with. And I don't remember people talking about or seeming to accept the idea of violence against those jurors. This is something that we haven't seen that much of before, and I think it's dangerous and it's improper.
Preet Bharara, thank you as always. Thank you for joining me this evening. I appreciate you taking the time.